Hello everyone, welcome to the deep dive. It is a Carabao Cup Final special. It's Liverpool, it's Chelsea, it's Wembley, it's Pajak, it's Jon MacKenzie from Tifo Football Podcast. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm really excited to talk about Liverpool. I think they're one of the most interesting teams this season. So.
Well, they are. Yeah. They really are. I can't wait to get your opinions on it. But we're going to start with Chelsea, of course. Obviously, Pochettino been in charge there now for a few months, and I think it's fair to say the questions are still out about him. Are Chelsea as bad as people are making out?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things about Chelsea to not like. It does feel as though what we've got from Pochettino is a fairly outdated idea of how to play football, and I think we're starting to see those cracks emerge, particularly against Liverpool. So recently 4-1 win for Liverpool at Anfield, and I think Liverpool are the team who are going to cause the most problems for this kind of Chelsea side and some of the structural issues they have too.
Okay, well, obviously, I mean, Pochettino's known for playing that 4-2-3-1 at Tottenham Hotspur and stuff. Is it the tried and tested 4-2-3-1 from Pochettino's Chelsea, or is it slightly different? I think
it's changed a little bit, because I think what we mean by the tried and tested 4-2-3-1 that we saw when he was at Spurs is often you see Eric Dyer in this position, one of the centre midfielders, just dropping into the space between the two centre backs, and that just gives you the cover then to push your fullbacks super high, really aggressive, and then you've got Dele Alli often pushing into the front line, but you've got Christian Eriksen who can drop into the midfield to help Moussa Dembele out, and then you've got Son and Kane up front, just a really, really exciting attacking unit. But I think this kind of approach is maybe a little bit less popular than it was. Now we don't see fullbacks being pushed super high up the field at the same time these days, because as you know from Liverpool, you played in that way and started seeing these kind of areas being targeted by opponents
every week.
Yeah. So we don't often see Chelsea playing in this kind of way, although they do sometimes end up in this kind of shape. So against Crystal Palace at the weekend, we saw Enzo Fernandez dropping in a little bit, but they had Axel Disasi, I think, in that game playing as a fullback, which means that you give yourself a little bit more cover in these kind of areas. So teams obviously thinking a little bit more about that. But yeah, I would say that it's moved away from those kind of ideas, but I think that's because football has moved on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, well, maybe we'll break it down. Obviously, we spoke before the show and you were sort of talking about breaking it down into groups of players. So what are Chelsea trying to achieve with each sort of bank of players?
Yeah, it's all about trying to control the game in different phases, right? So often in possession, the back four is going to be trying to do things to actually maintain possession of the ball, move the ball down the field, and particularly progress the ball in ways that you can then access the final third pretty well. So you've got your back four here, and we are seeing fullbacks pushing up. So often what will happen is, let's say for example you've got Ben Chilwell here, he'll move right up in quite an aggressive positioning here, and then the rest of the back four will move around to form a three. And I think this is, again, we were talking about the way that modern football is moving, and the general idea, I think the best way to explain it is just try and get as many players in forward areas as possible when you're going forward, and then try and have as many players back when you're defending. And you want to feel as though you've got the opposition to feel as though you've got an extra player in each of those different phases.
Sort of equate it to a good try in rugby. You know, where there's the pass, and then you realise there's a defender there, but there's still an attacker or something, and there's a 2-on-1. It's what Manchester City have kind of done against Liverpool for years. There's always a 2-on-1 on the fullback, and that's it, isn't it? It's how do you have those players to be able to be both areas of the field, both defensively and offensively?
And you've still got your three players in the back line here as well, which gives you a nice unit to build up from as well. But we have seen, as I said recently, Chelsea have done slightly different things. So let's imagine that we've got a back four here.
And who would these players be at the moment? Obviously?
I mean, they're mixing players up all the time, in part, I guess, because they're still trying to find ways that work. But I think in recent iterations, we've seen Ben Chilwell on one side and then like a defensive centre-back on this side. So I mentioned Disasi before as well. They also have Malo Gusto as well. Yeah. It all depends what kind of profile of player you want in there.
I think they played Gusto against us and in the last game against Palace, the other guy.
Right. And I guess if you've got two attacking fullbacks here, then if you're going to move your attacking fullbacks further forward, you're going to want your centre midfielder to drop in. Usually it gives you a bit more extra cover, but also again allows you to be able to control, usually against opposition teams who are going to be pressing with two at the front line. So it just gives you that extra player, allows you to possess the ball as well. So in recent games, we've seen Caicedo in particular dropping out here. But then let's go to the central midfield unit then. So generally the idea is you want to end up with three players here. You want to get into settled possession, and then if you've got an attacking fullback here, then you may just end up with the two centre backs and then the central midfielder as well helping out here. But yeah, In terms of midfield, you then have usually Caicedo just as the pivot player and the deepest defending player as well, so often operating in this space and often getting quite isolated in this space, but we can talk about that a little bit more. And then next to him you have usually Enzo Fernandez, and again we talk about double pivots, single pivots. There's a flexibility here for Chelsea to do what they want against different opponents. It may be the case that they want to overload in this kind of area around the opposition 10. So there's a lot of teams again pressing the front two, but then with a 10 behind them as well. And you might want to then drop one of your 8s alongside that, just to cause a little bit of tension. I like to talk about tension when it comes to trying to build out through different pressing units. So if you've got an opposition player in here, you can then overload them with 2 players, and then you can force them one way and then generate a 3-man on the other side. So most modern midfields then will have a 3-man midfield. You can play with a single pivot, you can play with a double pivot. You have the flexibility to be able to do that.
It's all about creating angles and space and passing lanes.
That's right. Yeah. Again, in every phase of play, you want to generate. The tactical nerd word is superiorities that you'll hear a lot. And there's lots of different types of superiority. You can get qualitative in superiority, which could be like you want to get a really good winger up against a fullback because you think this player is always going to get around them with the ball, but you can also create spatial numerical as well. And the idea there is that if you've got two players in the same sort of area here, if you force this guy across here, then you've got the option around here, and that's just a really nice way of generating free players around the pitch, which is a really nice way of then progressing the ball down the field.
Well, how did they take it from that to these players?
Yeah, well, this is one of the problems that they've had this season. I think sometimes it comes down to the fact that you have a player like Enzo Fernandez, right, who is an elite central midfielder. Really, he's probably going to be the best player that Chelsea have in terms of the deep build-up. So if there's games where they're struggling to move the ball forward out of their own build-up unit, then he may drop in to help out. But then you're removing him from being further up the field. In terms of them being quite a creative player as well. And so I think one of the problems they've had this season has been you end up with him being in the wrong place at the wrong time, because he's either dropping in deep here to help with the build-up and now you have fewer players forward, or you're just relying on Caicedo here then, and you've got a little bit of space here to be accessed by the opponent when they win the ball back as well. So yeah, often what happens, I think, because they're bad in build-up phases, is that they aren't able to progress through the middle of the pitch, which is super important, I think, in modern football, again, because it's just way more dangerous to generate through the centre of the field. And so what they end up doing then is moving into the wide areas, and it becomes very much a case of, the amount of times where you'll see even just someone like Enzo Fernandez here, and they're loading up the front line. You've got your back line here, ball out here, and you're trying to either hit the byline through your fullback or through a half space pass to a forward, or you're just lumping it into the box. And one of the reasons I think why Chelsea have struggled is because it's so easy for teams to clear that ball away and have people in the space between that attacking line and the defensive line.
I can sort of picture it as well. Obviously, I think the ball from sort of this area of the field works when a team is transitioning backwards. But when a team is facing you,
sure,
and they can see the ball coming in, it's just not a dangerous pass anymore.
Yeah, and I think because they really struggle to move the ball down the field quickly. Again, it just gives teams more time to get into defensive structures as well. I think Chelsea are the team who've spent the second most amount of time in their own third, which suggests they have build-up issues. That's this season. So yeah, they're doing everything they can to try and ease the progression of the ball down the field, but they're not doing it quickly enough. So oppositions can just set themselves really nicely, and then you end up with these problems, like I say, where you sling the ball in, all the opposition have to do is clear it out and have a player in this kind of area, and then suddenly you're going to get overrun.
And that's where Liverpool are absolutely brilliant as well, isn't it?
Which is why I said before, these are the sort of problems that are really going to be exacerbated by Liverpool.
I mean, obviously you've talked a little bit about the build-up issues and stuff like that, but what did Chelsea do that's good?
I mean, it very much
like
depends.
That answer. Just laugh.
I think that the areas where Chelsea, the games where Chelsea do okay in is the games where they're able to control possession of the ball and move it down the field and get their dangerous attacking players into, in and around the box, which, it's not rocket science, but I think so much of what they do depends on the opponents that they're coming up against. So in these sorts of scenarios, if they get into these areas where they're running out of ideas with the ball and they're trying to push against the opposition back line, and they turn the ball over, if they lose the ball in these scenarios, it's so easy for them to be attacked that I think that often the games where they look quite good are the games where they are able to keep control of the ball, even if they're not that dangerous with it. As soon as they come up against teams who are going to counter-press them or have got really aggressive pressing systems, they start losing that edge as well, and so they're a little bit flaky defensively, and in possession they can be a little bit flaky if teams are really good out of possession. So this is why Liverpool are a team that are going to cause them problems, because they're not going to allow them to possess the ball. Their build-up can be shaky, so they can lose the ball. So Liverpool get high turnovers. There's plenty of examples of that in the 4-1 game as well. But also out of possession, I think they leave spaces open that can be exploited by smart teams as well. And so this is the reason why they're mid-table. This is the reason why they're fighting amongst the teams that you wouldn't expect to see.
You've just described a team that's comfortable against a low block who doesn't press. Now, none of the top teams in the league do that.
Yeah.
And why on earth? I mean, do they press high up the field?
Yes.
Is it good? Is it worthwhile pressing? Because there's pressing and there's good quality pressing, isn't there?
And I think this is why I talk about Pochettino's system as maybe being a bit outdated, because it feels as though, against certain teams they'll be fine because the system will work against them, and less good teams will struggle to build up through them. They'll struggle to win the ball off them, and so generally they'll be okay. But in modern football now, the elite teams are just so good at everything. So particularly at the beginning of the game, in the 4-1 game, Chelsea trying to build out from the back, Liverpool just incredibly aggressive in their high press, and they just couldn't get through. And then so you're getting high turnovers all around these kind of areas here. We'll go the other way around because Chelsea playing that way. Yeah. You get me. You're losing the ball in really, really vulnerable positions. You end up going long. You're then not able to defend the ball coming back, and it just feels like it falls to pieces quite quickly.
And I think historically, when Liverpool have been good, the pressing numbers also sort of do that. The year we won the league, we were absolutely incredible at it. I've noticed our sort of PPDA getting better and better week in, week out at the moment, and stuff like that. But for me, and I don't know whether this is true, maybe we're not ready to move on to Liverpool just yet, but Curtis Jones feels integral to Liverpool's press, because Klopp talked about it a couple of years ago. I think it was the year after we won the European Cup, and he said, well, what are you going to do? He said, well, we've got to surprise them with the press. Everyone knows our triggers now. And then all of a sudden, Fabinho started popping up from the 6 with a really high press, and you'd see it. But now it feels like Kurt Jones is almost the guy that goes, I've been here a long time, I've been brought up in this system, I'm going to go and everybody else is going to follow. And that's where I thought that Chelsea struggled against Liverpool, is when we go, we hunt in packs, and they're just a little bit slow, and maybe it's to do with the build-up problems that you've mentioned. Yeah, I mean, we can get on to talk about Liverpool's out of possession, because I think it's always fun to talk about that, but maybe we want to talk about what Chelsea are doing out of possession as well, because you said are there situations where their high press is working, and so they basically defend out of a 4-4-2 like this. You've got the ball, this is the front two, you have the wide forwards, 2 central midfielders. Get rid of them. Yeah, that's maybe confusing. But let's throw the pivot on, because I think it's always good to distinguish between teams that build up with a single double pivot. So against a team that are going to build up with a double pivot with a back from a back 4, Chelsea will often do this sort of pendulum press. Mm-hmm. Maybe let's just throw the back 4 just to help me more than anyone. But yeah, so they'll build it with a pendulum press. So you basically have your 2 forward players in the 4-4-2 orienting themselves around the pivot player. Mm-hmm. You push out this way, and then you've still got cover on the pivot. If the ball comes out this way, you can either just track this player around, or you can do this. So one pushes up, the other drops it. No one ever presses Van Dijk, but I'll let you know. It's always the other centre half. Yeah, right. You force it that way. But this gives you the cover to be able to do that. And sometimes what we'll see from Chelsea as well is, like, when they're playing against teams they want to go really aggressive against in certain phases. So let's say that this centre back receives it badly and it's facing the other way. They may jump onto both centre backs. In which case, what do you do with the pivot? And usually it's Enzo Fernandez who jumps up on here. But the problem is that you've now got your fullbacks, your wide forwards on the fullbacks. You've got Caicedo in this space here. If they get through, and you've got Alisson here. Yeah. If you can get through this high press, which is, you've got the spare man in the goalkeeper, and Alisson's good. And we're used to using the goalkeeper this season as well. It's something new, another wrinkle for us. You then end up with these scenarios where you can get the ball into this area again, and it's wide open. Now, sometimes what they do is they'll try and cheat with one of usually this wide forward. So you'll have another player here, the midfielder here. So let's say this is Szoboszlai. Yep. And then you've got Bradley here, whatever, Trent, So in these scenarios when Enzo jumps up, he's leaving this player. So you might see the wide forward
jump in. But again, you can do, it's tensions, right?
Yeah.
You now have the ability to find this free man, and you can pull them around quite considerably. And this is something that I think we've seen a few teams do this season, because if you can pull them up, and you've got Enzo jumping, then there's literally just one player covering all.
Huge amounts of space.
Even if there's two here, what you then can start doing is pulling everyone across on one side.
Free up this side.
Yeah, free up this side, which is one of the ways that you tried to cause them problems out of possession. The other thing is, as we've said, is they just allow space in between this line, so the line of the forward pressing unit, and then the defensive unit as well. And Liverpool kill teams in here. You get, I don't know, Diogo Jota in here, Szoboszlai in here, running at a backpedaling, and you have wide forwards coming in. You've got Núñez somewhere around causing havoc as he does. This is horrible. So I think two different things here, two different ways of not being able to control space. So they have issues with vertical space, and this is one thing that Liverpool really tried to turn the screw on, but also that they have problems controlling this space as well. That's another thing Liverpool.
I think you've told me off camera before how many times you've watched that Liverpool-Chelsea game, and what you've just explained with that was exactly what Liverpool did to free up Conor Bradley in this situation, wasn't it, time and time again? Yeah, so this is really good, really nice way of talking about why you might invert your fullback. So Joe Gomez was inverting in this game, so you're going to end up with your, let's get back to a 4-4-2-ish shape, like this. Should we throw the rest? Yeah, sure.
So front three, there's your midfield, your 2 8s, there's your pivot player. There's your fullback. So your fullback's going to come inside here.
Yep.
The reason that you're doing that is because you want to. I always talk, whenever I talk about why you invert fullbacks, you're always going to talk about what advantages are you getting from this. The advantage you're getting from this is that Chelsea are marking the fullback with their wide forward. So Gomez comes inside like this. It's going to pull Madueke usually narrower. This then opens up space here, right? And you've got Luis Diaz, I think it was against Chelsea, moving into this space. So you've got really nice access here. You're building up from the back. You've got 3 against 2, so you're going to be confident, plus the goalkeeper, so you're going to be confident you're going to be able to keep this. You're threatening to build up through the middle, so that's the reason why you're going to move the fullback inside. And the reason why I think they used Gomez on this side, and they had Bradley here, I think even with Trent, they might have done the same thing here and not inverted him as much, because they know that there's this side weakness, space weakness on the side, and so you want your fullbacks to be able to get into this kind of area. So this is, who's this? Diogo Jota, is it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, he was playing on the right hand side. Núñez was up top.
Szoboszlai and Curtis Jones. Yeah. So what you're then going to do is you're going to move the ball into this space here and then get the ball quickly into Diaz. This is
who loves to dribble, by the way, and wants to be one-on-one. It's that qualitative advantage.
Yeah, and I think this player here, I think, is Axel Disasi, but correct me on this. But the reason why I think it's him is because he was very slow coming out. Felt like he wanted to stay in that back line a little bit more. But maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I've got the lineup. It was Disasi. You're absolutely spot on. Yeah.
So the space around him here. Chelsea are going to shift across, right, because the space has opened up here. Madueke, and we're going to have everyone shifting this way. Fullback's going to be in here. Jota is going to pull across inside, and I think for the Bradley goal, which is the second goal, I think he just makes a run this way, right?
Yeah.
Squeezes the back line altogether.
Frees up the space.
This is Raheem Sterling.
Yeah.
And at the start of this move, when the ball comes in here, they're together. By the time the ball starts moving into this space, it's just Bradley in acres of space. The ball comes through the middle, and then there was
it Gakpo at this point? Was it the term from Gakpo? I can't remember exactly, but I
can't remember who it was. Ball in, and then Bradley's through. Happened again.
It was a great finish, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And what a story! Conor Bradley coming in and scoring in that game, and just coming in to cover for Trent and putting up something like 5 or 6 goal involvements within the game.
It's been absolutely ridiculous, but it's actually, I suppose it does lead us into Liverpool quite well if we maybe I'll take the Chelsea players off the board for now, but I think one of the things I find really interesting, actually really interested to get your opinion on it. I've actually really liked the Gomez with Conor Bradley style thing, because my question, and you sort of answered it before, I suppose, about who would invert. Obviously Trent's so good with the ball at his feet, you'd probably consider bringing him in. But the Joe Gomez the way he plays it differently to Andy Robertson allows you to do it in a different way, doesn't it? And I think that's going to be key for Liverpool moving forwards, I think, is how we want to build up, because it's looked so good when we've gone into more of a, you know, you've got the two defenders, centre halves, you've got Joe Gomez, you've got Conor Bradley, we've had Alexis McAllister, it could be Endo, we don't know. When Gomez moves in here, in days gone by, Liverpool have gone to 3 at the back, haven't they? But now we're going 2, like sort of an off-camber 3, and then we're moving up there. I mean, the first iteration of Liverpool 2.0 was this, wasn't it? The 3 at the back, Trent moves in, but we are seeing an updated version of this, and what have you made of it?
Yeah, I think when we talk about inverting fullbacks, as I said, you always need to talk about what are the advantages that you're getting. Now, when Man City do it, it's very different from what happens when Spurs do it, or Man United do it, or Liverpool do it. But I think when Liverpool started off doing it, I think they were trying to do it like Man City for a number of reasons, right? And, you know, Trent's on record saying this. It's basically saying, Klopp said to me, I think you can play like a 6, drop into these areas and help us, you know, build through the middle. Gives us a little, this was at a period when you were struggling with just getting overrun in the middle as well, right? So it gives you an extra player in that midfield area as well, in case you lose the ball. But, you know, you're going to always be overcrowded. We've just talked about having a 4-4-2 press, so the front unit's going to look like this. So what you've essentially got is your 2 pivot players now encircled by six players. That means that if you're going to be able to progress through the middle, you're going to have to be really good technically to receive back to goal, and then either play bounce passes in a la Brighton, or, you know, Man City's Rodri and Stones doing this and getting through into this area where Liverpool are going to eat up. You're going to have to be really good at that for it to get any real in possession upside from it. And Trent, for all the fact that he is a world-class player and remarkable in ways that I don't think anyone else in world football is, he's not that player. And so what I think started happening then was a realisation that we're not actually getting, you're not really getting much benefit from having Trent here from an in possession point of view, because all he's doing now is just what we call pinning, right, which is keeping this unit quite narrow to make sure that you can't build through the middle.
But you want him because his passing range is so good, so you want him out of that space.
You want to have him with the ball at his feet facing down the field, which is why he's a fullback, because you get him into these areas and he can play all of these passes, right?
He's got everything.
What we started seeing that as time went by was a realisation that actually what you can do with him now is just drop him out. So you're getting him, it's the same sort of thing. You've got Kanate pushing out here, right, and blah, blah, blah. He's dropping outside of the block. You've still got your pivot in here to try and pin this. He's dropping out, and this is super dangerous now, because he doesn't have to have the issue of receiving the ball this way.
Back to goal
because he can receive the ball just like this, into space. Forward, and now you've opened up loads more passing angles, right? You've got him closer to this channel, right, which we know he plays the ball into. But he also has the option of going the other way as well. I mean, obviously right-footed, he has an angle bias this way, so it is harder for him to find these channels, but it just gives him much better passing option. And the other thing it does is that you're not trying to build through the pivot into this area. Now you've got players here who can just punch the ball through. Alexis McAllister are actually very good at this as well.
His progressive passes are ridiculous.
So
and along the floor more often than not with Alexis, where you see it and it's like bang, Wolf and Thiago.
Punch passes, bang, through, and you take out this whole unit. You move the ball around and you drag this around until you find that pass open, and then you play it.
It's like watching the rondos before the game. Yeah. That's what they're looking for in those rondos, isn't it? Where they put them at one either end and bang, it goes through there.
So I think Liverpool 2.0, the first iteration, was it evolved into this, and it was obviously really important. But I think the problem, part of the problem has been that Trent's been in and out of the team, right? And I think once you lose that player who can do that, the system doesn't work so well, and it causes other problems as well, right? Which is when you're moving your fullback from out wide into more central space, you now have to provide width with someone else, right? So what do? Do you use Szoboszlai out here? Do you have Mohamed Salah dropping in here, receiving the ball back to goal, which isn't his forte if he's got a fullback right up behind him? And you're taking him miles away from where you want him to be, right? You want Salah to be narrow, forward, on this line, running to goal. So I think part of the reason that Trent Alexander-Arnold works is because he's just a really elite player. Structurally, it doesn't really work. It causes as many problems as it solves. Whereas I think when you start then moving Gomez inside, you are able to generate other advantages, right? So you've now got Luis Diaz, who you can have dropping in here. You can go narrow with your front three, or with your front, the rest of your front three over here. Pull everyone across, and then you've got Conor Bradley as a classic over here. Gomez coming inside opens up access to this area, and then you have this really nice option of building that way as well. So 2 different options for building: punch through the middle into this space, or shift them onto one side and hit the back post area, or the other side of the field, which is both of which we saw as I think really important tactics against Chelsea.
I think the other thing that I've noticed over the last few weeks is obviously we've spoken at length over the years about the triangles that Liverpool try and sort of get with some of their players. If I sort of go back into the classic sort of 4-3-3, and I think of Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think of Jordan Henderson, I think of Mo Salah, and each have the ability to go wherever they want. I think Liverpool lost that a little bit, and as we've gotten to grips with the new way of us playing, we're starting to see more of those rotating triangles. Is that something you're seeing from us?
Yeah, again, and this comes down to all of the things about structure that we're talking about with the inverting fullback, because as soon as you invert the fullback, how do you generate this? Because then someone has to drop in here, or someone has to drop in here. And I think part of the problem that I had with Trent inverting is that, he's still going to hit these areas, which is where you want him to hit in the half space and play these back post crosses, which he's so dangerous from. But it's a timing thing now, because he's now the player playing the pass before the pass that reaches him and then goes in, right? And he can't get from here to here because he's part of the build-up unit. And so because you guys are so direct, there's just timing issues. So again, it comes down to, let's talk about flexibility. It's like in certain games we're going to need Trent to drop deep or drop central in order to help us play these passes forward, in which case we're going to be much more dynamic perhaps than we were in the past. Like I think of the classic triangle, where it's Henderson here, Trent here, Salah here, but then Salah comes in, Henderson comes out wide or drops out to cover, and then you've got these rotate, and they're so dangerous. It's a very Marcelo Bielsa sort of thing, I think, to have this triangle. Ange Postecoglou does it as well now. Generate these sorts of wide triangles which you can just control the ball higher up the field. I think they were more important to you when you're trying to play a bit more of a controlled game. And you're trying to break down low blocks. I think Liverpool 2.0 or 2.1 or whatever it is that we've got now is way more transitional than it used to be. And so this is less important because you're less in need of having control in these areas, because what you're trying to do actually is sit a little bit deeper, bait opposition presses forward. And now you've got Trent deeper, he can punch those passes through, or you can use McAllister as well, get the ball into these spaces, and then you're running at speed from here to here, rather than, we need to pull apart a low block, tease up the edges of that around. These rotating triangles really help in that respect, because you're just moving around, you're rotating, and it means that the opposition defence are like, who are we covering here?
But it is that adaptability that you need as a top side, isn't it? And you need to be a well-coached side to be able to do that, because you do come up against low blocks and you need to have, it's almost muscle memory with Salah and Trent, but it's not really been there with the other midfielder. But Szoboszlai is looking
this is so personnel based as well, right? It's like, how do we get the players that we want into the best positions? And Jordan Henderson, like, with the best will in the world, is the least important of these players in an attacking sense, right? So you want to get Salah into these areas.
You want Trent in this area.
Yeah, Trent in this area or in the half space here. And if Trent is going here or here, you need to cover the space that he's left, which is why Henderson was so important in that sense, right? So it's definitely a personnel thing as well, and you now have different players in those kind of areas, and we're playing Conor Bradley, probably much more dangerous in these kind of spaces than he is in that kind of space, right? So there's less of a need for that as well. So that's what everything comes down to in football, is what personnel do we have? How can we use the structure to actually bring out the best in those personnel? So I think, we still see those triangles, because like you say, Liverpool do still come up against low blocks. But I do think that we see less of it because Liverpool are trying to be much more dynamic in attack than they used to
you see that all the time. I mean, one of the classic shouts when you're at the match, as I'm sure you'll know, is it's that sigh when you pass the ball backwards. If you just turn around and scream to someone, we're opening up space. You pass the ball back from here, the team comes out, the gaps in between the lines get bigger and bigger, and Liverpool want it this end, because it's classic Serie A footy from the 90s, if when it was on the telly on Channel 4 for us growing up and stuff, and you'd see them probe all the way back, probe all the way back, probe all the way back, and they constantly bringing out the space to be able to attack into, and yet for some reason match-going fans on the whole seem to, or a few of them just don't seem to get it, do they?
Yeah. Again, let's talk about Chelsea, because as you said, with Chelsea out of possession, the weaknesses are vertical space, vertical compactness, so playing the switch, but also, sorry, that's horizontal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Horizontal space.
You did that earlier as well, actually.
Did I? Sorry.
Yeah. I knew what you meant.
That's a goalkeeper, isn't it? yes, we've talked about how you can create space on one side, pull everyone across on one side to create space on the other. But another thing that Chelsea are doing is they're going to be baited forward, right? So we've talked about how they like to push their wide players onto the fullbacks. There's then questions about what do you do with the pivot? Does Enzo jump in here? Then what do you do with the spare player here? And then you've got Caicedo now. There's tensions here. You can drop your wide player in, but it's going to be, it was Nicholas Jackson against Palace. It's Raheem Sterling against you guys. That is a tension that is going to be easy to cause problems to. And this is where the space then opens out, right? It's in this area here where you've got Caicedo and you can overload now. You can get your 2/8s into these sorts of positions if you want. Again, that's another reason why it's great to invert your fullback here, because you don't need Curtis Jones dropping in. You can keep him higher up the pitch, generating this tension. But this is why Liverpool want to reset all the time, because they want to have the ball moving across their back line until, as we've said, this is a really nice structure for a pressing unit to sort of stop you from getting through. You play it one side to the other, and then eventually that punch pass comes through. Most teams, I think, most elite teams are going to try and generate it by playing these bounce passes. Liverpool don't really do that much, because they know that they can use these players almost as positional pawns to just pull
one side to the other,
and then you punch through, and then suddenly
someone switches off, the passing lane opens. Absolutely. Up, bang, you're into
how many times did this happen in the Chelsea game, where one ball through, Alexis McAllister, there was one time he just played it through the first goal, he plays the ball through to Jota takes the ball down, defence backpedaling, two defenders come together, and the old adage comes through, which is the most vulnerable space between two defenders through the middle, comes through, and bang, goal. So I think 3 of the 4 goals were all caused by being able to manipulate weaknesses in Chelsea's structure. So first one, finding that space between the line of the defence and the midfield, and then the second one, pulling all to one side, Bradley coming in. Third one, Bradley finding himself in space again, Szoboszlai in the middle. I can't remember what the fourth one was. What was the fourth? Oh, it was Nunes to Diaz at the back post. Again, caused by another area where I think Chelsea are going to struggle, which is high turnovers. So they're going to try and build up with a 4.
What do you make of Liverpool's press? Actually, that's probably
so it's interesting. So from the goal kicks, you're talking about the two pivots. So Caicedo and Enzo here, and then we've got Liverpool swinging their front line round. So this is Jota, this is Nunes, and now Diaz is moving across here. You then got your 2 pivots pushing up onto the
Caicedo and Enzo.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't call them pivots. There's 2 central midfielders pushing across here. Someone covering, I can't remember who's covering here, but essentially the idea is then that you're just going man for man. They play the ball out here, and then suddenly everyone jumps, and it's like, oh, this isn't great. Sometimes you've got Cole Palmer dropping in here to try and create tension. Diaz just drops off here and is ready to jump in advance if the ball comes across here, and then you've got someone behind him ready to jump in. But that was particularly in the first 20 minutes, just really aggressive. Chelsea trying to build up, losing the ball, and then Liverpool being able to counter-attack from there as well. When you went 2-0 up, you went back into your standard sort of 4-3-3 press, which is, the 8s are really aggressive if you're front. So your 2-8s here, confused as to what's going on, but 2-8s here. Happy to let them build out from the back, but what happens is that it's the 8 who's going to jump out and chase the ball
more
down.
often than not.
Curtis Jones used to be, Jordan Henderson in the last few seasons. How many times did we see him just bomb it all the way up here and chase the ball around? But Szoboszlai as well, great at it too, and it just gives you a little bit more. It gives you a little bit more pep, I think, in the press to be able to jump out, be aggressive, force the ball one way, and then squeeze on the sidelines.
If you're looking to take advantage of Liverpool's press, what are you looking at, John?
That's a good question. I mean, every high press is always going to have weaknesses that it forces elsewhere, right? So in this, let's get rid of Chelsea because it's a little bit confusing. Oops, that's not good. So Liverpool, this is Liverpool's front unit here, and then the 8 behind. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that the ball's on this side, this 8 can jump up. So you're almost ending up with a sort of 4-2-4 shape. So the weaknesses are going to be the space behind the 8, so the 6 jumping up, or the space between the fullback and the wide forward in that kind of shape. So the big question is always how do you find the ball into these kind of areas, and can you?
I think that's what Arsenal were really good at against us. Then they were brilliant at that. Obviously, I think, you know, for the first goal against Arsenal, if I remember correctly, Virgil is sort of caught between going all the way into the middle against Odegaard and then dropping off, and he goes in, which is very not Virgil van Dijk. He's more of a reactive, going to make you make a decision type of a player, and we played it through. I think Trent was drawn inside, that opened up space, Virgil moves forwards, and they were pulling us around.
It was tension, so you've got the ball comes into Havertz here, and you've got Zinchenko here. This is Arsenal in the red here.
Yeah, okay.
Pretend this is, maybe you can edit this a different colour, but you then have Havertz dropping in into this space. Sorry, that's Havertz. You have
Trent went with Zinchenko.
Yeah, so it's Gravenberch here, right? So Gravenberch is here, and he's nominally covering this space here. Havertz drops in, and now there's a problem. What do you do in this scenario? There's the tension that I keep talking about. They play a bounce pass across here, and Gravenberch comes across, and then they just plays it to Gabriel, bang through to Zinchenko. Now Trent jumps up here. Because Trent's gone, you've got Konate moving across to Martinelli. You've got Odegaard over here who's jumped in, and Van Dijk pulls all the way up here. So you've got no one, and then you've got Gomez over here. Once that ball is played here, Havertz finds the space he's created, ball goes into Odegaard here, and then he just plays the first time pass, and then he's through. But interestingly, I mean, this is really nice, and it's that's a problem that can be caused if you're going to be really aggressive in your press. It only happened once. They only broke you down through build-up once. Most of the time, actually, what they were having to do was break you down in out of possession, win the ball back. They basically Liverpooled you in that sense. You couldn't go as direct as you might have wanted to do because you didn't have the correct personnel in the team to be able to do that, which is one reason I think why Trent played wide in that game rather than coming inside. I think the realisation was the best way we can utilise Trent is not by having him on the ball here trying to play these punch passes, because Arsenal is so good at blocking out the middle. So the next best thing to do is just have him coming in at the back post or on the far side here and receiving like Bradley was, and then playing these crosses in. There was a few examples of that happening in the first half, but it forced you to have to try and build up a little bit more. Arsenal have probably the best press in the world right now, and you couldn't really get through it. The Gomez inversion thing wasn't working at all, wasn't allowing you to... In
fact, Kurt Jones ends up doing what you were talking about with Chelsea and Enzo Fernandez before, is he ends up coming back and sitting there trying to get...
And you end up with the shape... Let's move you back to red, come on. I've had my fun. But yeah, he ends up coming inside, and then, as you say, Curtis Jones drops out wide, and all you've done then is just take the player who you probably prefer here, put them here, and the player you'd probably prefer to have here, and put them there, which caused all kinds of problems as well. So yeah, I think interestingly in the second half, you then went to a more classic double pivot. Didn't you? And
I just still never understood why Jürgen didn't put Núñez over on the left-hand side after the FA Cup game. That was the one thing that I was a bit like, what on earth's going on?
He didn't come on until the second half as well.
No, he came on and then he went through the centre, and it was a bit like, the FA Cup game, he gave them all kinds of trouble over there, and Diaz went to the right-hand side, and Jota went through the centre, I think it was, and we just carried on doing the same thing, and that was the one thing where Jürgen's been incredible at his use of substitutions, and I don't think he thinks of them, and I think that's something that, is an interesting talking point in and of itself, is, substitutes came in, 5 substitutes came in, was it 2021 maybe, something like that. We went that first year, we went to 3.3 substitutes per match. We're at like 4.67, I think it is, give or take now. We look at Manchester City and Arsenal, they're not there yet. That's something that Jürgen's looking to try and gain an advance, because the rules changed. And he's one of the top managers in the game, and he's like, well, marginal gains, I can use more players, and he's changing 3 or 4 at a time, on 60. So it was a bit strange. It was the first time I think I've seen Jürgen make a mistake with the subs in a long time.
The Arsenal games I think were really interesting as well, because there was 3 in a row, right? And then the first one, you were able to sort of control the game by making it chaotic. In the second one, I think in the FA Cup game, they sort of were able to control the game in the first half, and then it became much more stretched in the second, which is when you got the goals at the end in the FA Cup game. And then even in the most recent one, obviously Arsenal come out and end up winning that. But I think once you get to half time, Arteta just was quite happy just going long, trying to win second balls and go that way, which again I think suited you. And until the mistakes happened, I think in the second half, that game was heading to a 1-1 draw probably. So yeah, it's an interesting side
on the day. I'll never say otherwise.
Yeah, no, I think they were, but I think you were probably the better side in the game where you drew 1-1 in the Premier League, right?
Yeah, right. So whatever it was.
It's the way that it goes. But I think you come out of those kind of games thinking, well, this team's won, so they're much more dangerous. When actually, if you watch the game back, and I've watched it a few times now, it very much came down to Arsenal were able to control the game. Liverpool tried to build up, lost the ball a lot in turnovers, and then Arsenal were able to generate a lot of chances in that way. I mean, the Saka header, the first chance, was just a straight throw from Raya to Martinelli, bang, cross in. Yes, there was the nice build-up play that we've just run through. That accounted for something like 1 XG of the many XG, but there was other...
It was 3.5 maybe, was it?
Yeah, it was quite high. But again, I think the XG was maybe a little bit misleading because of certain reasons, but the majority of that XG...
6 big chances in that game, if I remember correctly. I mean, it's a high figure. We've seen some high figures at Liverpool this season as well. John, I'm going to have to stop you there because it's been fascinating talking to you. We've run roughshod over my agenda, so I'm going to have to get you back on to Chelsea. What do you think the score is going to be in the Liverpool-Chelsea game?
Yeah, I mean, the big question is, what can Chelsea do to make sure that the problems that they faced against Liverpool last time don't happen? And it's hard to know what that is because I feel as though these problems have been happening all the way through the season for them. So problems with horizontal space, problems with vertical space. Now you can drop your Enzo Fernandez deeper and make sure that he's always helping cover with Caicedo. That's going to make you much less dangerous going forward. So it's the Rafa Benitez saying, the blankets. Yeah, exactly. So the things that are going to make them, I think, safer defensively is going to be the things that make them less aggressive from an attacking point of view. So. Yeah, it's hard to know how they solve these problems beyond being a lot more compact, but then that will make them much less dangerous. So, yeah, it's a question of, for me, the personnel that Liverpool have available for this game as well. So we've heard that Trent isn't going to be playing. So how do you cause those problems of punching the ball through into the space in between the midfield and
it might be
defense?
McAllister over Endo would be a good example of that because he's so good at those progressive passes.
Yeah, but again, like we've seen in that game Bradley played, and they were able to use that to their advantage as well in terms of the wide space as well. So yeah, it's a game where I expect Liverpool to win. Anything can happen in football, of course, but in terms of when you look at the structural matchups, as we've seen, and we hopefully have emphasised that enough through this session, is that the problems that exist for this Chelsea team are the sorts of problems that Liverpool can really cause problems with, and so the onus is on Chelsea to try and fix them rather than Liverpool to think of anything too smart to come back against them. So.
Well, John, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Really enjoyed it.
Sorry, thank you so much.
I could talk about this forever.
Absolutely loved it every second. Obviously, you can check John out on the Incredible Tifo Football Podcast, the Tifo YouTube channel. You'll have heard about it if you're into this side of stuff, of course. I've been Chris Pajak. That's been Jon MacKenzie. That is our Carabao Cup Final deep dive. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ra.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the content today. If you want to get your name in and amongst these wonderful people, then head to redmenplus.com. Join as a Legend tier subscriber. You're going to get free merchandise codes. You're going to get in our Discord, and you're going to get your name at the end of YouTube videos. Yes, redmenplus.com, Legend tier status.